It's all yours.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Regan Carver. My title is Design Team Supervisor, which doesn't say a whole lot, but I'm basically the engineering support for the water system down at the Water Sewer Streets Bureau, which is part of the Department of Environmental Services. And we run the distribution system of our water system. I've been with the county for 12 years. I started in the stormwater group up at Courthouse, and then came down to Water Sewer Streets a couple of years later. About 5 years ago, I started acting in the position I'm in now, actually when Amani went and took over operations of the water system. So I backfilled in for her. And she is technically still in that position, but is actually now filling in a different position down at the water pollution control plant, which is our sewage treatment plant, which is the only plant we have in the county. We get our kind of the start of the presentation will be where our water comes from, and that is we buy our water from the Washington Aqueduct in DC, which is run by the Army Corps of Engineers. So the we don't produce our water, they do, but we have it's a collaborative effort somewhat with their customers, which are the biggest one being DC Water, and then us in Fairfax. And then I don't know if Monty, did you want to say anything? Or no?
I think you got it covered.
Okay. So I'll just
To clarify, Regan is going to do the presentation, and I am here to ask any questions, to help answer any questions that come in.
all right, so let me share. I'm not sure. Yeah, this one. All right, so as I said, I think it sounded like you guys are mostly interested in the water quality, so that's what most of the presentation is about, but I'm more than happy to talk about the system itself. And this first slide is just about the system itself. We get all our water from the Potomac River treated at the Washington Aqueduct, which, as I said, was run by the Corps of Engineers. It comes in through a few mains across the Potomac to Arlington, and then we're kind of lucky in that we basically slope downhill from north to south, so we don't have too many pumping stations, real flat areas or areas where they have to go uphill, have to have a lot more. And about 525 miles of main, thousands of valves and services. And we have 32 million gallons of finished water reservoirs, mostly at Minor Hill on the western end of the county. And then I'm sure you're familiar with the elevated tank at Lee. And there's 2 tanks there as well, 2 ground storage tanks. And then SCADA is our system to monitor. We have sensors throughout the system to monitor pressure and chlorine levels and things like that. So SCADA keeps us informed that we can monitor that from our control center down at Water Sewer Streets. And if there's a question that you want to jump in with, whoever, Gary, monitoring, if you think it's right to bring it up now, then that's fine.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. One concerns water main breaks.
Yeah, there are a few of those, right?
Do you attend to all of them? Are you the ones that take care of that, or
I mean, our bureau is, and Amani's position, the operations chief, is who oversees the crews that attend to the breaks. It probably at least 90% are our crews. Occasionally, when we have too many at one time, or if there's a large water main break, then we bring a contractor in. But yes, it's all our crews, and I'm at some of them, but definitely not all of them.
Okay, and the other question Amani has just answered, which was how many water towers are there? And she said only 2 elevated tanks and 6 underground tanks. And that's it for now.
Okay. So this is just so as I said, we don't treat the water, so we own the distribution system, and mostly, that's mostly pipes. So this is our water mains by decade. The vast majority of our system was built before 1960. Most of that is also cast iron and unlined cast iron. And one of our water quality issues is rust in the water. So a reddish tinge sometimes people complain about. And that's from that unlined cast iron. Usually that rust is stable, but sometimes it washes and mixes in with the water. It's not a health concern, but obviously people don't like to see their water discolored. And so one of our main maintenance and task is addressing those issues. And I'll get to that later, but it's, either we have a cleaning and linings program where it's just like it sounds. We clean out the pipe and then line it with a cement liner. And that takes care of that water quality issue. And then of course we replace water mains, and that also takes care of the water quality issue, but also, gives a brand new pipe that has better strength and hopefully doesn't break. And I don't know if there's probably people on the meeting that have been affected by a water main break in the last month. We've had, I think, 50 this month. And, especially a couple of weeks ago with that really bad cold, it's not just the cold, it's really the ground, big changes in temperature. So we had all those breaks when it got really cold, and then when it warmed up, it was almost as bad because the ground shifts, and that's what makes the pipes break usually.
Somebody asked, what's the difference between ductile and cast iron?
So ductile is more flexible, and so it's less prone to break. And so all new water main, except for unique situations where we need plastic or something for some reason, all new water mains are ductile iron now. So we stopped using cast. Amani could probably give a better answer, but I think around the 70s.
Yeah, I think the main difference between the two is just one is brittle. So one is more brittle than the other, and that's the cast iron. We stopped using it, just like Regan said, probably in the late, probably 60s. And then we started using mainly ductile iron.
We have another question. Can you explain the temporary change in water disinfectant every spring?
Again, Amani's right. Yeah, we do. We usually do chloramines, and we get into that later. And that's to limit the disinfectant byproducts that get in the water. But we do have that period for I think a month and a half, 6 weeks, or is it where we go to chlorine, and it's kind of just flush out the system. And you want to give any more detail on that?
I don't know how long have you guys been around, but the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, back in the late 90s, early 2000, they basically came up with a new rule to regulate or to make to stringent the disinfection byproducts. So, when you add chlorine to the water, there is stuff that can come up with it, like another compounds. So you got to control that as well. So, it's one of those that since then we switched it to chloramine instead of free chlorine, and then we believe that we shock the system. So when you just switch the disinfectant, you're basically shocking that system, and you're flushing to make sure that there is no bacteria or anything that grows in there. It's one way for us to maintain the system. That's why they call it spring cleaning.
And when we make that change, we flush the whole system. So it's an added benefit of clearing everything out, because water age is a big issue for water quality. So, the longer water sitting in the pipe, the longer bacteria can grow or establish. And so there's that benefit as well that goes along with it.
Okay, and we've got somebody saying that they frequently have a strong chlorine smell and gray water coming out of the faucets in their condo. Does that should that be a health concern because it's such a noticeable odor?
It's not. If it bothers you, you can let it sit and the chlorine will evaporate out of the water. But yeah, and then the gray water, I would maybe have to see. And in a condo building, sometimes, there can be things going on inside the building that we have no control of that can affect that as well. Never hurts to, remove the aerators and flush the faucets and make sure everything's cleared out. Okay. I need to move. So for water quality, the EPA regulates us they've given authority to Virginia Department of Health to regulate us under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so that sets the health standards we have to meet, what we have to test for, and regulates testing at the water plant as well, the source of the water. So in the Potomac, and then as the water leaves into our system. And so that regulates you. More than 90 contaminants in drinking water. And so those 90 or more than 90 are the primary regulations that are all drinking water systems have to abide by, meet certain levels. And then there's secondary regulations that are guidelines that we, and that's that more aesthetic things that don't have a shown health risk, but are unpleasant, the color and odor. And so again, so at the plant, in the Potomac and at the plant, they have their testing that they do, and that's monthly and it's submitted to the EPA. Since they're in DC, they submit directly to the EPA, whereas we submit to VDH. And then where we come in is in our distribution system. The main program is the total coliforms rule, which is testing for bacteria, any other than compounds that cause cancer, which aren't, we don't find, but the biggest health issue for anyone is, bacteria in the water. And so the total coliforms rule, we test monthly at least 120 sites throughout the system. And just to make sure there are no coliforms. Okay, if we do get a positive hit, then we have to go back and retest and make sure that sometimes it's just the faucet wasn't clean quite right. Like everything has to be immaculate, testing at the faucet. So, and then we have to test upstream and downstream if we do have a positive, but that's our main sampling program to make sure that the water is safe. And then we have quarterly for we were mentioning the disinfection byproducts. We test for those quarterly to make sure they're below the national EPA standards. And all these tests, we always test pH and temperature as well. And then another quarterly, or the water quality parameters, which are, that is a result of the lead and copper rule, where we test for alkalinity and chloride, fluoride, and orthophosphate. Orthophosphate is something that's added at the plant that is inhibits the reaction between the water and the metal of the pipe. And this is mainly because of lead pipes. So, like Flint, Michigan, they had such problems when they changed their water source, and they didn't have that protection on the pipes, and they had lead pipes, and we do not have lead pipes. So, but DC does, and so we get the water from the same place. So the I believe we'd have to orthophosphate anyway, but it's mainly due to the lead, any jurisdiction with lead pipes. And
you mentioned that we get our water from the DC aqueduct. Is that the only source of Arlington's drinking water?
It is, yes. We have some backup feeds if there's an emergency, but not to provide long-term for the whole county.
And you mentioned that we don't have lead pipes. Do you do any testing for lead?
We do. Funny you should ask. So when the lead and copper rule came into being, we had to test every year. We showed we were below a threshold in which we could then go to every 3 years. So we test every 3 years for lead and copper. And so in 2022, we tested, and and we've never had an issue with our lead levels. And, some lead will show up. There are, internal plumbing, there can be lead joints, or, solder used to have more lead in it. So it's not zero, but yeah, we're well below all EPA regulations. And then there's a lead and copper rule revision that's been published, and one of the big things it requires is, many jurisdictions have known they have lead, and they're kind of slow walking doing much about it. So EPA really stepped up the pressure to get everybody to get rid of all lead service lines, because it's really the water. There's very lead water mains aren't usually the issue. It's the service lines. And so they're making sure they're pushing everybody to get rid of all of them on the public and private side. So the first step in that is we have to do an inventory of all of our service lines on the pub. So for a house, any building in Arlington, the water meter is usually, right behind the sidewalk, right behind the curb. And Arlington owns the water main and the service through the meter to just past the meter. And then after that, it's the homeowner or property owner owns the service. But EPA doesn't care who owns it. They want it all gone. So we have to do an inventory of everything. So we are working on that. And of course, the hardest part, we've found regulations that in, I think, I forget the years, late 30s or early 40s, where we said we will not use lead, but we have no way of knowing what anybody's done on the private side. So we're going to the meter boxes to look at the materials and do an inventory that way. And then soon we're going to have a website up where property owners can take a picture of where their water comes into the house, of what the material is, and submit that so we can build on our inventory on the private side. So And then another regulation that for water quality is the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. EPA started that in I think 2010. And every 5 years they come up with a list of things they want to monitor that there's no set threshold, but they want to start getting data to see if it's something that should be regulated. We are on UCMR 5, and that one now is almost all PFAS, which are the forever chemicals that I imagine most of you are aware of. There's stories all the time about them, that compounds that just don't go away, and so they get into drinking water because they're in the river. And so the current UCMR is for 29 PFAS chemicals and lithium. And this year we will sample quarterly at the plant for those. But we've done preliminary sampling as well. And the plant has been doing quarterly sampling, and EPA is looking to set PFAS. It's very complicated because it's really hard to test for PFAS, and the levels are so low that it's hard to set a threshold, but they're working on doing that. And the thresholds they're proposing, all our samples have been below that. So
Got a couple more questions. If somebody does have lead pipes coming into their house, can they be relined, or do they have to be removed and replaced?
I think they need to be removed and replaced. EPA's guidance is that even if so it's October of 2024 that it goes into effect, but if you know of a lead service, then even if there's work going on around it, you have to take mitigation activities due to just that pipe getting jostled and lead falling into the, shaking into the water. So I think with lead, it really should replace the pipe.
And as a property owner, how can somebody find out if their service line has been replaced?
So you can potentially check plumbing permits, but if chances are, I've had trouble trying to find that information because we've been working on that. But the best thing to do, most houses where the water comes in, where your main shutoff valve is, you can see what material is coming up there. And there's probably by next week, our website will be up where we can, actually, I think it's up now, but officially we'll have guidance on how to tell what the material, test you can do. Because sometimes, iron and lead look similar. So there's a magnet test you can do, scratch test. So if you're not sure, there'll be a number for somebody on my team you can call to get help on that. And we'll have a system where you can submit a picture, and then we can help you determine as well.
Another question, are the chemicals in the water that cause buildup in shower heads, is it necessary to change the shower heads regularly? And if so, how often?
I don't think so. So I think a lot of times that buildup is, calcium. We have pretty hard water. So usually you can clean, I think, soaking in vinegar or something. There are ways to clean that pretty easily without replacing. I think it's rare you'd have to replace it. And then there's magnesium or manganese. Sometimes if you've ever had the kind of black slime, that's manganese bacteria, which is also not a health concern, but not pretty. And it's that is usually you need to take off any aerators or anything you can and flush it and clean as best you can, and usually it's fine after that.
Are things like Brita water filters good enough to remove these negative compounds and chlorine from drinking water?
I don't think they help with chlorine, but the fact that it's sitting in the pitcher, it can evaporate. So I guess not with the top. But they are good for many of, I think they're even, I think the activated carbon is even good for the PFAS. So yeah, they remove a lot of things.
Okay, no more questions right now.
And then we have an annual water quality report, and we have a water quality page. I have the link there. Of course, it's not an easy link. If you go to our website, arlingtonva.us, and just search water quality reports, it should be the first link. So there's, and so you can see what our sample results are.
And you mail those out to people, right?
It's mostly posted online, and then
A request. So
yeah, by request we will mail them to people.
Okay.
And so then this is getting back to the iron in the water. So I pretty much touched on all this, but and because it is the biggest complaint we get is the rust in the water. If you do have issues, you can call the Water Control Center at that number, 703-228-6555. And but and until we can clean in line or replace a main for continuing problems with that, then we will come out, we'll send people out to flush at your meter and or a nearby hydrant, just to flush that rusty water out and draw in newer water. And this is just what it looks like. So on the left, the picture on the left is, a pipe that has that new cement lining. And I mean, sometimes the really old pipes can be very the flow area is reduced because of all that rust buildup. So the cleaning also increases the flow that we can get through that pipe, and then makes it a nice clean pipe that protects the metal from the water. And then, of course, water main replacements we do. And I think that's it. So for the presentation, but any questions, any more questions?
Yep. One is what accounts for some areas having really great water pressure and other areas not so much?
So it's all, so as I said, our water comes in near at Chain Bridge over the Potomac, and then we pump to Minor Hill, and then Arlington mostly slopes from north to south, and so pressure is just based on the hydraulic grade line, which is the level water would get to if free to the air, and then and the elevation where you're taking the pressure. So when the water we try to keep the pressure between 40 and 80 psi. We can't completely do that, but so if you think on a hill, if you're at the top of the hill and you're at 40 psi, as you go down the hill, your neighbors are going to get higher and higher pressure. Every 2.31 feet is 1 psi. So you go down 10 feet, you're going to go up 4 psi in pressure. And so the pressure we have coming from the plant sets that the initial PSI, and then once the elevation gets low enough and the pressure is getting up past 80, then we have what are called pressure reducing valves that do exactly like it sounds and reduce the pressure to the next pressure. So we have pressure zones. And in a pressure zone, the HGL is the same for that entire pressure zone. So the pressure is not the same, the HGL is the same. So when you're at a higher elevation, you're going to have lower pressure, and lower elevation, you're going to have higher pressure until that next pressure zone where it's going to drop it because it's gotten too high, and then so on through the next pressure zone. So especially in some hilly neighborhoods, there are pretty big differences in what that pressure is.
Next question is, does your group provide input to developers of high-rise buildings on water availability?
Our group, we do not. They have any development, there's they have to do calculations to figure out we do do fire flow test to show what pressures and flow they'll be able to get, and that's part of their site plan submission, is showing what the fire flows are. So, and then they have to design, what water service size, what water meter size they need to serve the building.
Do you know if the new stormwater runoff guidelines will affect water volume in the Potomac or water quality?
I don't think it's going to have volumes. I can't imagine it's because it's really, most of our stormwater regulations are to deal with that sharp peak, which is where we really get the worst flooding. Long, steady rains don't tend to give us bad problems, but the real flashy floods do. So I think, I'm not super familiar with the new regulations, but I think it's also mainly trying to, reduce new impervious area. And so I don't think it's going to necessarily reduce anything, but hopefully not make it worse. And then the stormwater fund is to implement projects to deal with flooding, areas that have bad flooding during those flashy events.
All right, have anybody else have any questions? I wanted to ask, how long do the cement liners on the pipes last?
That they should last probably 100 years. That's generally what we expect of pipes in general. And then, there's less, they don't react like metal does. So they should stand up longer than the pipe.
And this person says, sometimes they see stormwater drains on the street that are blocked by tree branches or other debris. Would it help to put something like a mesh screen over that?
I don't think, because that's generally going to create more backup, because smaller material can block it than currently.
What happens to the water leaving the water treatment plant? Does it go back directly to the Potomac River?
So from our plant, it goes into 4 Mile Run, because our plant's down, off South Glebe at 4 Mile Run. So that water does go right directly into 4 Mile Run, and is very clean water when it leaves the plant.
Of all of the chemicals that you test for, are there any that particularly concern you that, you know, seem to be getting worse or difficult to track?
No, we actually, one that the plant tracks is something that this past year we had some issue with. It's geosmin, which is a bacteria that in the Potomac River, and during the we had almost drought conditions for a little while. We've had so much rain now that it's hard to remember, but we were near drought conditions, and when the Potomac River gets lower, that geosmin grows more, and that creates a taste in the water. Like some people were complaining about an earthy taste to the water, and I think Montgomery County had worse issues with it. So that's the only one I can think of that recently I've seen have a spike in issues, but we seem to be pretty steady on everything.
Did you do testing for coronavirus back in 2019, 2020? And are you testing wastewater now for coronavirus?
I haven't heard of Arlington doing that. I know that I mean, I've read articles of that happening, and predicting spikes in cases, but I'm not familiar if we do that at our plant.
Somebody just asked the question I was about to ask. Where does our water quality rank among other counties in Virginia and nationwide?
I don't know how to answer that exactly, but I would say pretty high. I mean, we always meet or exceed all the regulations, and it's about all you can go on, I think.
Do you guys coordinate with your counterparts around the DMV to, talk about issues people are having and how they're dealing with it?
We do, yeah. We're members of COG, Metro Council of Governments, I think, and then meet, and also with getting our water from a different that serves other jurisdictions, so we have a lot of contact with DC Water and Fairfax. Yeah.
Any thoughts about how the water that comes from the faucet, excuse me, compares to bottled drinking water?
Well, at the county fair, we always do a taste test that everybody can do to see if they can tell the difference or which one they like better. I drink tap water. I mean, I live in Springfield and Fairfax County, but I don't drink bottled water here or at work, so I like the taste of it, but I don't know exactly how it compares.
Yeah, we've got a couple of comments along those lines. Somebody said Fairfax had brought a truck full of water to I forget where, the county fair, and people were surprised at how much better it tasted than what was coming out of their taps.
Oh, really?
They were wondering if, the long trip down all the mains and service lines, they were picking stuff up. But somebody else said they love the taste of Arlington's water and can sometimes tell the difference between it and other sources. Do you provide inputs for the water and sewer billing rates?
I mean, we're involved in that process of setting the rates because those rates pay for us maintaining the system. Um, that's about it, I think.
How many miles of mains or service lines do you guys reline or replace in a typical year?
So we reline about I think a mile a year, and then we replace about 3 miles.
We line 5 miles a year. We line 5 miles.
Oh, it's 5. Oh,
We do about 1.5% to 2% of the system between lining and replacement.
okay. So about 5 miles of relining. Because, and another reason for that, the relining, as I said, addresses water quality and helps flow, but doesn't add structural integrity to the pipe. But the reason we do it is it does have those positive benefits and is much cheaper than replacing.
And what is the decision to replace driven by, water main breaks or major catastrophic failures like that rather than just relining?
Yeah, it's mostly breaks. And then, as I said, we expect 100 years life of a main, and our system's starting to get, as I said, most of it was built before 1960, so it's aging pretty quickly. So some of it is, but there are enough breaks that we can focus on areas that have breaks, not do it just by age.
With the constant growth in Arlington's population, do you have concerns about being able to meet the demand for water going forward? Are there plans to expand capacity?
We don't have, so with more efficient fixtures for many years now, our water usage has stayed flat or gone down a little bit. It seems like maybe it's starting to finally level out. But as population has increased and we haven't had any, consumption has actually gone down. So we seem to be good for a pretty long time, but we do, with COG, we do look at other sources, because we are dependent only on the Potomac River. So there's talks about trying to find other storage areas for emergencies if there was a spill in the Potomac that impacted us for a long time or something.
We got a comment here that they like the art design decorations around the water and sewer plants on South Glebe Road.
Great.
Now you mentioned greater efficiency in fixtures. Are there any particular upgrades you would say everybody should look into that would really make a difference?
I think I think mainly I would just pay attention to if you hear toilet running, if you hear water running when you're not running water, figure out what that is. I mean, a lot of times it's just a bad flapper on the toilet or something, and because that can add up fast. But really it's been just as people replace, when they get a new toilet, then it's lower flow has been what's impacted that the most.
Okay, we got any other questions or comments?
So anybody else want to ask our guests anything else? Well, it's 10:52, so if not, I certainly want to thank, did you
Well, we
have
do
something
have
to
one
say, Gary?
question.
Oh, okay.
Do you get enough funding from the county to maintain normal operations, or is that a constant struggle?
It, it's a great question. We do. I I do get concerned with how old our system is. How much that's maybe going to have to go up at some point to replace this. It's really it's not just our water system. It's infrastructure throughout the country, where we did so much in the 40s and 50s, and then haven't done a lot since. So I can see that being an issue later, but for now we're doing fine.
The question about sewer lines as opposed to water mains, do they break as much as water mains?
Not at all, because they're except for we have some force mains where we have to pump sewage up a hill to another sewer shed, but otherwise, they're not under pressure, and water or the drinking waters, those pipes are under pressure, and so that's why there's the breaks on the water and not the sanitary or storm. And sanitary pipes usually aren't even flowing full, so there's.
This program is also available for download on
Is the water quality level the same everywhere in Arlington?
No, because it's
was made possible by a generous
the longer it takes water to get somewhere, the more time it has
by country.
to react with the pipe, and there are areas that just don't get as much usage, so you don't have the flow going through the pipes as much. So you have more stagnant water, and so and then most of our system is looped, so like a block will have water main all around, so water, though of course that's mainly for breaks, so if there's a break, water can come from somewhere else, but any dead end, then that's the edges of pressure zones, and like cul-de-sacs are where we tend to have the most water quality issues, because you have a main that can serve 100 houses, and it ends on a cul-de-sac, and those last few houses aren't pulling as much water through, and so it's older water, and can have lesser quality.
But that's mostly cosmetic. There's no health concerns with that.
Right. And then
Yeah, there is no, overall, the drinking water quality is the same throughout Arlington. But just as Regan said, the real main difference is that rusty water complains, which again, if you live at the dead end and you're not moving the water as much, that's kind of where it tends to have that rusty water issues. And we always let our residents know that if you do live on a cul-de-sac, you do have that problem, call us and we will send someone out to flush. And we do have our list of flushing that we do quarterly and some monthly. But again, if you do run into any of those issues, just let us know and we'll come out and flush.
And there was a question about getting hold of the reports, which is now posted in the chat. So
yeah, I posted the link.
Yeah.
That was in that presentation, and I just realized I can put it there. So
can we get a copy of your presentation to have
Sure.
to give out to anybody that's interested?
Yeah, I'll save it as a PDF and email it.
Great. That'd be great.
Well, who knew there was so much to know about Arlington's water? I mean, this is absolutely fabulous. You provided so much information, Regan, and Amani. We really appreciate this. And I was going to remind everybody, in addition to getting Regan's presentation, again, as Gary indicated earlier, we have a ANV YouTube channel where all of these coffee and conversation programs are posted. So if a colleague or friend or family member wants to know about Arlington's drinking water, they can take a look there as well. So thank you, Regan and Amani, for joining us today.
Great. Thanks for having us, and thanks for all the good work you do.
Well, thank you. So it's almost 11 o'clock. So just as a reminder, next week on Coffee and Conversation, our guest will be curator Sarah Levitt, who's going to talk about the Lillian and Albert Small Capital Jewish Museum, one of the newest museums in DC, and talk about the Jewish experience in the National Capital Region. So I'm sure that will be of great interest to everyone, and be sure and tune in yourself and log on, not tune in, log on, and be sure and tell friends and colleagues and family members to do the same. So with that, I think we'll close out today and see you next week.